Hello, and welcome back to the world of Wysteria. We will now read part 2, should be the conclusion of chapter 40. They now had a general plan. Drop in as close to Emily as possible, hold off the enemy with their weapons while they free her, then jump out. I just wish we knew more about the environment we'll be walking into, Will remarked. The layout of the room, the number of guards, where they're positioned. It would make this much easier. Indeed, said Jeremy. A scouting mission would be risky, however. It's essential that you surprise them. Charlotte agreed with Jeremy. I'd be afraid they would spot me if I tried to get a quick look, she said. I'm not stealthy enough. There are those who are, but it would take time to find them. Will then stood up. Yes, we should be going. I want to get her out of there. Do you have any last words of advice? He asked his mentor. I do, Jeremy replied. I would advise you to wait. Wait? Yes, until tomorrow night. Why? He asked, sitting back down in his chair. For a few reasons, said Jeremy. We must assume that Nathan will be expecting someone, if not you, to come after her. I imagine he'll be waiting close by, ready for a fight. If no one shows up tonight, he might relax his guard. He won't stay by her side, poised to strike forever. In addition, we don't yet know Nathan's intentions. It's possible he means to release her after giving her a good scare. Even if his initial plan was to keep her, he might have second thoughts and decide to let her go. Emily's a smart girl. Perhaps she can persuade him that it's in his best interest to do so. Possibly, thought Will, although, recalling their first encounter with the drifters, he could imagine her making the situation worse. I would suggest that you, Charlotte, send Emily another message when you get home, Jeremy continued. Tell her you are coming, so that she can be ready when you appear. Also, ask her to describe her surroundings in as much detail as she can. She may not receive it or be able to reply, but it's worth a try. Any information she could give you would be valuable. In the meantime, he said, still speaking to Charlotte, you can search for a scout, someone you can trust, who can get in and out unseen. As much as Will hated the idea of Emily spending another night in Nathan's dungeon, he saw Jeremy's point and reluctantly agreed to wait until tomorrow. I should head back to Wysteria, he said, just in case she shows up. I'll start searching for a spy, said Charlotte. As she and Will were about to leave, Jeremy stopped them. He walked across the room and rummaged through a cabinet, then returned with a small box, which he set on the table beside his chair. Take these, he said, opening the box and producing a matched pair of small, ornate daggers. They're beautiful, said Charlotte. Yes, he replied, pulling one from its sheath and inspecting the blade. A gift from an old friend. Excellent steel. He resheathed the dagger, then handed both of them to Will. Keep these hidden, he said. It's always prudent to have a second weapon. Can you carry them? Charlotte asked Will. I'm not sure, he said, looking at Jeremy for an answer. Jeremy shrugged. You managed to transport your watch. We'll see. Will thanked him for the additional arms, as well as his counsel. Then they left, Charlotte setting off to hunt for help, while Will returned to Wysteria, with nothing to do but wait. Once he'd returned to his room in the castle, Will checked his pocket and was relieved to find that the daggers Jeremy had given them had come with him. Since they had, it meant he should be able to transport these and his other weapons into Nathan's world tomorrow. He started to put them away under his bed with the crossbow and sword, but then decided they should be stored more securely. They were valuable items, and their owners knew Will had them. If they were somehow lost, the rescue mission would have little chance of success. A drawer or chest seemed no less obvious a hiding place. Glancing around the room, Will's eyes lit on one of the bookshelves on the other side of the room. He gathered the relics and brought them over to the wall of books. He pressed on one of the volumes, pushing it forward an inch. Then, hearing a soft click, he pulled on the shelf, which opened like a door, revealing a small, shallow closet. After stashing the weapons in the newly created secret vault, Will went out onto the balcony and walked to the railing. Gazing into the chasm, he recalled the day he and Emily had leapt from the bank, their jump, their magical encounter with Alicia, the conversation with Iris, and the ferocious battle that followed. As Will reflected on the fight, he realized how fortunate he was to have his guardian angel there that day. Without her invisible intervention, the quarrel aimed at his head would have found its mark, sending him home. He then thought of Lily. She had come to his aid as well, and not for the first time. Dear, sweet Lily. Will hadn't spoken to her since he'd learned who she was, and what she was to him. When he next saw her, it would be in a completely different light. I should talk to her, he said to himself. Yes, when this was over, he would pay her a visit. Then again, why not now? He wanted to remain in Wysteria for as long as he could. Jeremy or Charlotte might come across some new information that called for a change in plan. He had hours to kill. The walk into town would do him good, occupying time and his anxious mind. Once there, Will went directly to the tavern, where he found Lily behind the bar, engaged in a lively conversation with a couple who sat opposite her. Seeing him enter, she greeted him with a glowing smile. Her expression quickly changed, however, as he returned a forced grin that did little to mask his emotional state. While he walked to the back of the room, Lily filled her patron's cups, politely excused herself, and followed him to the table by the hearth. "What's wrong, my sweet?" she asked, sitting down beside him. "Is it that obvious?" he replied. "There was a time when I knew your every thought," she said, laying her hand upon his. "But your feelings, those you cannot hide from me." "No, I suppose not." Will looked up from the table and into her caring eyes. "They have Emily." Lily gasped. "How?" she asked. "Did those men return?" Will told her how Emily had been abducted, snatched away as she was leaving him. He then explained that Charlotte had received a message from her, leaving aside how, stating who was holding her and where. "You're going after her," Lily responded, an assertion, not a question. "Yes," he said. "Tomorrow. Charlotte and I." "Ah, with her," she replied, lowering her eyes. "Good. You will not be alone." There was no longer any reason to dance around the issue. "Do you know something about Charlotte that I don't?" he asked her. Lily seemed uncomfortable with the question and hesitated to answer. But Will wasn't about to let it go. Emily's fate was at stake, he explained to her. He had to be certain that Charlotte was a trustworthy partner. "The night you first saw her, you told me I should be careful," he said. "Why?" "It was not the first night I saw her," she answered. "What do you mean?" Will asked. "When? Where?" "I saw her when I was with you," she said. "Before." "Before what?" Lily stared into his eyes. "Before we were here, Will. Before there was a here." "You saw Charlotte in my dreams?" he asked, as the veil began to lift. "Dreams?" She pronounced the word as if it were foreign to her. "Yes, those fleeting worlds where we used to meet," she answered. "I saw her there several times, young, pretty, though her hair was different then, longer and blonde. She watched you, at first from a distance, her eyes predatory. Not that she meant you harm, but she did mean to have you. I could see it. Then, one night, she approached you. She was charming, seductive. She knew how to get your attention. And once she had that, once she had pushed me from your mind, I was gone. It was the last time I saw her. She may have come again, but not when I was with you." Could it be true? Had Charlotte, who could travel into ordinary dreams, found her way into his? Was this why she seemed so familiar to him, and why she sometimes acted as though they shared a secret, which, though unbeknownst to him, they did? It certainly explained her wariness of Lily, for Lily could expose that secret to Will, perhaps to Emily. What would her dear friend think if she knew? I hope you understand and can forgive me, Will said to her. I don't remember anything that happened with you or with her in those other worlds. I do understand, she replied, with a comforting smile. And there's nothing to forgive. It just seems that you've been treated unfairly. It does not seem that way to me, she said. But what mattered at the moment was rescuing Emily from Nathan. Can I trust her tomorrow, he said, wondering to himself more than asking Lily's opinion. Would she betray Emily so that she could have you all to herself? Lily responded, unfolding his question. She wanted you, and may still, but I sense no evil in her. No, he said. She and Emily are too close. I can't imagine. You know better than I, she said. In her pursuit of you, whether out of love or simply desire, she may have pushed me aside, but she owed me nothing. I was merely an obstacle, not her friend. If you ask me, I would trust your feelings. Will leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. Thank you, he said. Even though I don't remember our past together, I understand what we are to each other. You're a part of me, even now in this world, and I'm glad you're here. Lily smiled warmly. I'm glad too, my beloved. With that, they stood and embraced. Then Will took his leave and began the long walk back to the castle, where he waited until sleep called him home. And that concludes chapter 40. And we will return with chapter 41.